Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Tuesday the 6th of January. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, Venezuela swears in a new president as the government reasserts control in Caracas, while Nicolás Maduro declares his innocence in a New York courtroom.
The Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen warns a US attack on Greenland would mark the end of NATO.
Plus, cracks widen in the UK's £330 billion wealth management industry as family offices start scaling back.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
As the toppling of Nicolás Maduro continues to reverberate around the world, Venezuela's government has sworn in Delcy Rodríguez as acting president. In Caracas, there are signs of a new wave of repression beginning. Witnesses have told Bloomberg that military counterintelligence officials have been patrolling the streets of Caracas. Several journalists are also said to have been detained. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller was asked if Delcy Rodríguez is consulting with President Trump.
Look, we have an oil embargo in Venezuela. For them to do any kind of commerce, they need our permission. We have our massive fleet, our armada, still present there. This is an active and ongoing U.S. government and military operation. And so, of course, we set the terms and conditions.
Miller also said that the US is getting complete and total cooperation from the government of Venezuela. In an interview with NBC, President Trump suggested the US may subsidize efforts by energy companies to rebuild Venezuela's oil industry. His comments underscore how the country's vast oil reserves are being seen by the White House as central to both the Venezuela's recovery and to US strategic interests.
Venezuela's captured President Nicolás Maduro has pleaded not guilty in his first US court appearance. He entered not guilty pleas to the 4 charges he faces of narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns, and conspiracy to possess machine guns. Speaking through an interpreter, Maduro told the court that he is innocent and a decent man who has been kidnapped from his home. Bloomberg's Miles Miller was at the hearing.
Prosecutors lay out a case in which there was a narco-terrorism conspiracy benefiting 4 gangs, including the Sinaloa cartel and Tren de Agras, and they believe that starting in 2000 and going up until about 2020, that they moved over 250 tons of cocaine per year through Venezuela, and that happened facilitated by Maduro and his wife.
Bloomberg's Miles Miller reporting. Maduro's wife, Celia Flores, who was also in court, pleaded not guilty to the 3 charges she faces.
The intervention in Venezuela has fed concerns about other controversial US foreign policy actions. Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen is warning that NATO will collapse if the US attacks Greenland. Here she is speaking to a Danish broadcaster.
I believe that the American president should be taken seriously when he says he wants Greenland. But I also want to make it clear that if the United States chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops.
Frederiksen, speaking via a translator, has begun to directly warn against a US attack and its consequences after the raid on Venezuela. Donald Trump has long argued that controlling Greenland is necessary for US national security. European leaders have publicly defended Denmark's sovereignty and NATO's principle of collective defence.
Well, European leaders and US officials are attempting to finalize a deal on security guarantees for Ukraine. Sources tell Bloomberg that talks in Paris today will discuss the possibility of US troops on the ground as allies attempt to coordinate their armed forces. Getting Western military backing has been a key red line for Ukraine, which fears Russia will undermine any peace settlement. Former US President of the German Marshall Fund, Heather Connolly, says progress towards any ceasefire is so far one-sided.
I'm seeing the positives on the Ukrainian and a European side. Russia, absolutely nothing. In fact, you see Vladimir Putin wanting to expand this war, not taking any of these signals. So progress on the Ukrainian, European side, nothing on the Russian side right now.
Heather Connolly speaking there. Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky has said that he hopes to set up a meeting in the US at the leaders' level by the end of January.
Italy is expected to reverse course and back the Mercosur free trade agreement, paving the way for the EU to approve the deal. Bloomberg understands the vote on the 9th of January will probably be the last major hurdle in sealing an agreement with this South American bloc of countries, which has been in the works for 25 years. News of Italy's change of heart comes after the country campaigned to delay the treaty last month alongside France, arguing it still lacked appropriate agricultural protections. A spokesperson for the Italian government declined to comment.
British finance chiefs are warming to the idea that AI could supercharge their profits. That's according to new research, which shows a sharp uptick in positive attitudes towards the technology among business leaders. Bloomberg's Tiwa Adebayo has the story.
Optimism is something in short supply amongst the UK's business leaders. Accountancy firm Deloitte's latest positivity measure came in at -13, whilst the Institute of Directors' Economic Confidence Index sits at -66. But when it comes to artificial intelligence, it seems that the opposite is true. Deloitte's recent survey shows more than half the country's chief financial officers expect a growth boost from the technology, and over 95% predict rising investment in the space by UK firms in the next 5 years. While concerns linger over whether AI will trigger job losses, it's also hailed as a potential game changer for the weak economic growth rates that have plagued the country for years. According to Central Bank Governor Andrew Bailey, the software could usher in the sort of growth last seen by computers and the internet. In London, Tiwa Adebayo, Bloomberg Radio.
And those are our top stories for you this morning. On the markets, Asian equities climbing to a record high. MSCI Asia Pacific Index up by 1.1%. You also had gains for US stocks on Monday. Nasdaq was up by almost 1%, 0.8% higher. Futures are up for Europe and for the US today. Oil prices are more muted today. They're down 0.3%, $61.56 the barrel. Looking at the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, a slightly weaker dollar this morning. And when it comes to 10-year Treasury yields, ahead of the labour market data that we get out of the US this week, we are up 2 basis points at 4.18 on 10-year Treasury yields. Those are the markets.
In a moment, we'll bring you the latest on what's been happening in Venezuela, plus why some family offices in the UK are starting to scale back their operations. But another story that we've been reading this morning, are you a betting person? Would you consider going out there and getting into the prediction markets game, this new area? Of course, a big question around it is whether it does count as gambling or as a financial product.
Yeah, having a flutter. Perhaps the prediction platforms, I think, have just become such a huge deal over the last year, particularly because you can bet on so many different things, or at least you can place money on so many real world events. I mean, sports and politics, the price of Bitcoin. Polymarket and Kalshi are the pioneers in this area. They are each now, as businesses, worth more than $10 billion themselves. A lot of traditional financial firms have also bought into this predictions industry. Stephen, the promoters basically talk about it as the ability to churn out intelligence on all sorts of things, harnessing and continuously updating the idea of the wisdom of the crowd. That's the kind of argument for. The issue is, though, that is emerging is that markets on these platforms are often very thin. Maybe a single trader can move prices. There are concerns about insider information, how that's handled, whether there's really a system to kind of root out bad actors. And then that also really came to the fore over the weekend because of a big bet around Venezuela this weekend.
Yeah, that's right. A trader in Polymarket made nearly $400,000 after betting on the capture of Nicolás Maduro, the biggest trades being placed just before President Donald Trump announced the military operation as well. So this is something that has led a growing number of state regulators in the US to talk about prediction markets needed to be treating as gambling. The big gambling firms already treat them as competitors. Now, the difference, of course, with these prediction markets is that people are betting against each other. There's no house setting odds. It's based on who has bet essentially the yes or no outcome against it. But it's a very interesting one to watch. Lots of questions about how this can be regulated. The CFTC, of course, still missing several commissioners, so an understaffed agency as well. This is going to be a very interesting one to watch. It's a great read this morning. Bets on Maduro and Jesus show promise as risks of prediction boom.
Now, let's bring you the latest on Venezuela. After Nicolás Maduro's court appearance in New York, we have been speaking to our senior US government editor, Derek Wallbank, and we started by asking him what we learned from Nicolás Maduro's court appearance.
It was a remarkable appearance here. You're talking about somebody who carries the title of president of a sovereign state, Venezuela, looking every bit like an ordinary defendant. Now, Nicolás Maduro is in no way ordinary. You know, he's a 6'3" guy. You know, he literally a head taller than all of the security people who were guarding him today. But other than that, he could have been anybody in that courtroom. He entered a plea of not guilty. He said he was a decent man. He said he had been, quote, kidnapped from his hometown in Caracas, and that was the start of what will be an involved process. The United States has, you know, certainly a bar to clear in a legal proceeding, and the Trump administration, though it has said for a very long time that it has a nailed down case against Maduro over drug trafficking and similar, you know, this is an administration that has sometimes struggled in the legal department. And so this will have to be an airtight case going forward.
Which could take some time, as you say. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, Delcy Rodríguez was sworn in as acting president, and the government there has also been reasserting itself. So is there any sign of broader change in Caracas?
Well, I think there's change in that one person is gone, but I think the question that you have about whether numbers 2 through infinity beyond, stepping up a notch, count as a change is one that's echoed by a lot of American lawmakers right now on both sides of the aisle. You know, certainly we've heard reports about people being arrested in Venezuela. It, you know, looks for all the world that even though Delcy Rodríguez is now making somewhat, you might say the word conciliatory, it doesn't quite feel right, but less bellicose statements today than yesterday. You know, the Trump administration would signal that that's progress. They've put Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, who used to be a Florida senator and has been involved in Latin American issues for a very, very long time, as a point person here. But certainly, I think there are a number of questions, not least of which, what of the Venezuelan opposition? Recall that Donald Trump got beaten for the Nobel Peace Prize by an opposition leader, and she went on Sean Hannity, one of the president's favorite TV shows on Fox News, and she told Sean Hannity, a close Trump ally, that she hasn't spoken to the president since October.
So what should we be expecting from the opposition in terms of all of this? Those comments, as you say, we heard from Maria Corina Machado, but should we be expecting more from them?
I think the question at this point is twofold. One, can the opposition demonstrate an ability to actually do the mechanics of governance? And two, what is the Trump administration's priority going to be? Now, I think they have been very, very clear, certainly the president has, that his goal here is stability and rebound. And that rebound is going to take the form of infrastructure. It's going to take the form of attempts to switch back on the fullness of resource extraction, particularly oil, in Venezuela. It's no secret that Venezuela has gone down by most metrics in the last many years. What is there to take over? What are you taking over? What does that look like? Who's going to want to go in knowing that Venezuela has a history of asset seizures from Western companies? President Donald Trump has said that he thinks that oil majors, American oil majors, think ExxonMobil, think ConocoPhillips, Chevron already has a presence related to Venezuela. So what are those things going to look like? That's a real open question. The energy secretary is supposed to meet with some oil companies later this week to sort of talk through some of this. But what that looks like and even who's involved is something I think that is very much up in the air.
So was our senior US government editor, Derek Wallbank, there. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this.
Now, let's go to a story here in the UK. Family offices catering to the fortunes of wealthy clans had proven a resilient part of the UK's wealth management industry, even after recent tax changes. But that now seems to be changing. Joining us is our ultra wealth reporter, Ben Stupples, who has more on this story. Ben, I read your piece with great interest. You found that these firms are starting to scale back operations in the UK. How are they doing that?
Good morning, Caroline. They are doing that by moving from, I would say, some of the nicest offices that money can buy in London, and going to maybe more down market, still nice places to work, but actually, for example, going from a really prime location in the middle of Chelsea to one actually down the road from our London office. Still a good place to be, but not as nice as before. Now, why are they doing this? They're obviously, family offices are very secretive. None are really telling us on the record what's going on. But we're trying to read between the lines here. And what's happening often is the billionaires that these firms serve, the billionaires behind them, are often relocating because of the tax changes. In this, we've got examples of ultra high net worths moving from the UK to Switzerland, trying to establish teams for their family offices elsewhere. This is a really significant move because amid all the UK wealth turmoil that we've been talking about over the last 18 months because of the non-domicile changes, a lot of people in the private wealth industry have gone, oh, we'll be fine. London is fine because the family offices are all still here. Yes, they are still here. But what we're seeing here is the first cracks really starting to show. And that is a significant development.
So talk to us about then the places that these family offices are going to instead. Where's the biggest draw for them and why?
And this is really interesting, Stephen, because actually they're going everywhere. I mean, all the other rival wealth hubs that traditionally that we have. So from Monaco, I mentioned Switzerland, the United Arab Emirates is rising increasingly as a big competitor for London. And this is the change here. I mean, 20 years ago, if you were creating a family office, you would go, okay, London, New York, maybe Hong Kong. And now you've got a whole menu of places where you can basically set up the main entity if you're our family office. And traditionally, you maybe would have one place, but actually now you can have multiple branches because family offices are growing in number, but also growing in scale and sophistication. So what we're seeing here is London's tax changes driving a global shift in the fact that family offices are operating in more than one location. And that is a big change from how this industry, a very secretive industry, but very influential because these firms serve billions of dollars typically each. A real shift in how things are operating today.
Yeah, and I mean, not to put the case, I suppose, for these amazingly wealthy individuals, but I was really fascinated by the point that you made in your story, which is here in the UK, those family offices have been funding a lot of startup businesses, which I thought was really very noteworthy. Those businesses that may be high growth or trying new things benefit from having those backers, which I thought was fascinating. So what do you think might be the broader effect then on the City of London?
Yeah, the ripple effects are starting to show. As you say, Caroline, family offices in the UK have accounted for about 3/4 in previous years for investing into the venture capital ecosystem. Other ripple effects are the prime property sales in prime central London, a non-dom hotspot, ultra high net worth hotspot. They're flatlining. And in the meantime, rental activity in that area is going up. Why? Because ultra high net worths are going, I don't think I want to live in London forever. Maybe so I won't buy a place, but maybe I'll just rent a place for a few years. And we've even had Ferrari, coming and saying, we're actually not going to have as many Ferraris in London right now because there aren't as many ultra high net worths there. So we're seeing the ripple effects. It's hard to point your finger and go, here's the definitive effect of the tax changes. But what we're reporting here is here's another sign of the spillover, of the fallout from the UK basically evolving in a world that's increasingly competitive for attracting ultra high net worth individuals. I'm sure there will be more coming forward, and I'll do my best to point them out for our audience.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.